My name is Clara Whitfield. I'm 29 years old. 11 days ago, my mother sent a group text to the family announcing that my sister Delaney's second wedding would be held at Ashford Hall on April 18th, and that I was graciously stepping aside to let my sister have the date I once reserved for myself. The text had a little heart emoji at the end. 3 of my aunts replied with clapping hands. My father replied, "Proud of you, Clara. Family first." I didn't reply. I didn't call. I opened a drawer in my apartment, pulled out a manila folder I hadn't touched in 14 months, and spread its contents across my kitchen counter. Inside that folder was the original master contract for Ashford Hall. 42 pages, signed on one line, in one name, mine. My parents had given my sister a venue they did not own. They had collected deposits for a wedding they had no legal authority to host. They had told 150 people to save the date, and none of them, not my mother, not my father, not my sister, not my sister's fiancé, not the coordinator my mother hired behind my back, had ever asked to see the paperwork. For 14 months, they had assumed I was too wounded to notice. They assumed I had crawled off to lick my wounds after calling off my own wedding. They assumed the $48,000 I'd already paid Ashford Hall had simply evaporated. They assumed wrong. Before I tell you what happened when 150 guests arrived at Ashford Hall on April 18th, please take a moment to like and subscribe. If this channel is new to you, I tell real-style stories about family boundaries and the quiet consequences of underestimating the wrong daughter. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. 14 months ago, a different April. I need to tell you what I do for a living, because everything that happens from here depends on it. I'm a senior event planner. I've worked in hospitality events since I was 22. For the last 4 years, I've been the director of events at a mid-sized venue management firm in the city. The kind of firm that handles corporate galas, 6-figure weddings, and the occasional governor's fundraiser. I read contracts for a living. I negotiate force majeure clauses over breakfast. I have a folder on my desktop called Clauses I Have Watched People Lose Money Over. I say this not to brag. I say this because in my family, my profession has always been the punchline. My mother calls me the party planner. My father, when someone at church asks, says I do weddings and things. My sister Delaney, who is a lifestyle influencer with 300,000 Instagram followers and a sponsored hair oil line, once introduced me at a dinner party as my little sister who throws cute little events. Delaney is 33. She is the golden child. She has always been the golden child. She was the flower girl at my parents' vow renewal when she was 4, and somewhere in the family mythology, that became proof that she was born to be the center of every ceremony. When she got engaged the first time at 26, my mother cried for a week. When I got engaged at 27, my mother said, "That's nice, honey. Let's not steal Delaney's shine." Let me give you the texture of it. When I was in the 6th grade, I won a regional essay contest. The prize was a weekend trip to the state capitol and $200. I came home with the certificate and the check. My mother put the certificate on the fridge for 3 days. On the 4th day, Delaney failed a cheerleading tryout and cried through dinner, and my mother took my certificate down and put up a flyer for a second chance tryout cheer camp. She did it without comment. The certificate ended up in a drawer. I never saw it again. I was 11. When I graduated from college, summa cum laude, my parents came to the ceremony because Delaney flew home from a trip and told them they should. My mother took 2 photos, One of me walking across the stage, blurred. One of Delaney and our father laughing on the lawn afterward, in focus. The second photo became her Christmas card that year. The caption said, "So proud of our girls." I was not in the frame. When I got my first promotion at Langstonburg at 25, my mother's response was, "That sounds busy. Delaney's thinking about starting her own brand. Did she tell you?" I don't tell you these stories because I am still angry about them. I tell you these stories because I want you to understand that by the time I was an adult, I had learned to give my family the version of me they were comfortable with. Small, quiet, helpful, flexible, the party planner, the one who never made waves. I didn't talk about my work. I didn't talk about my money. I didn't talk about the clients I had quietly grown and the contracts I had quietly negotiated, because every time I had tried to, in my 20s, the conversation had been politely redirected back to Delaney's latest adventure within 90 seconds. I had become, in my own family, a piece of furniture. And furniture does not announce itself. Delaney's first wedding was a 3-day event in Napa. My parents paid for most of it, about $80,000 worth, pulled from a retirement account my father has never quite rebuilt. The marriage lasted 19 months. Her husband, a very patient orthopedist named Grant, came home one Tuesday to find that she had cleaned out their joint savings to fund a personal rebrand. He filed the next morning. The story my family told about the divorce was that Grant was too controlling and didn't support her dreams. The story the court records told was different, but nobody in my family was inclined to look at court records. I didn't gloat. I didn't say a word. I sent her a casserole and a card that said, "I love you." That's who I am. Or that's who I was. My engagement was to a man named Elliot. He was a commercial architect. He was kind. He was measured. He was, as it turned out, also sleeping with his firm's senior partner, which I discovered 11 weeks before our wedding when she accidentally sent a photo intended for him to his personal number, which was still synced to our shared iPad. The photo was not ambiguous. Neither was the group chat beneath it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I packed his things into 2 suitcases and a banker's box. I drove to his office on a Tuesday at 4:45 p.m. I left them with the front desk security guard. I wrote personal effects on the box. Then I went home and did what I do for a living. I called my vendors. In 8 hours over the course of a very long Tuesday night, I canceled a wedding. I called the florist. I called the photographer. I called the band. I called the caterer. I emailed the officiant. I texted the bridal party. I wrote to each of them the same 4 sentences. The wedding is canceled. I am not able to talk about it right now. Please keep your deposit as full payment for services. I will be in touch about final paperwork. Most of them wrote back with kindness. One of them, the florist, who had done 3 corporate events with me the previous year, wrote, "Clara, honey, whoever he is, he was never going to deserve you. Let me know if you need a drinking partner." I cried at that one text for maybe 90 seconds. Then I kept calling. I did not call my mother that night. I did not call her the next day. I let my sister tell her on day 3 via Instagram because Delaney had already posted a sympathetic story about my baby sis going through it. I let the family grapevine do the work because I could not stand the thought of a phone call where my mother would say something that would enter my head and never leave. My mother sent me one text 3 days after Delaney's post. "Clara, sweetie, let me know if you need anything. Don't forget, everything happens for a reason." I did not reply. Here is the part that matters. 14 months before all this, when Elliot and I had first started planning our wedding, I had done something that seemed, at the time, like a sweet little professional indulgence. Ashford Hall is the most coveted venue in our region. It is a restored 1890s estate with a working carriage house, a 12-acre garden, and a guest list cap of 200. It books out 4 years in advance. My firm manages 3 of Ashford Hall's corporate clients, which meant I had a relationship with their general manager, Marcus Holbrook. Marcus had offered me something he did not offer anyone else. Because I was a long-time professional client, because I had personally referred 6 six-figure corporate events to Ashford Hall over 3 years, he let me sign a master venue contract in my name, personally, with a highly unusual rider. The rider stipulated that in the event of cancellation, the deposit would not be refunded, but the contract would convert into a 3-year personal use license, non-transferable, held exclusively by the named signatory. In other words, if my wedding didn't happen, the money I had paid didn't disappear. It stayed attached to Ashford Hall, attached to me, for 3 years. Available to be used once on any date that hall had open. The deposit I had paid was $48,000. It was my money. I had saved it across 4 years of work. Elliot had been going to reimburse his half and somehow had never quite gotten around to it. When I canceled my wedding, Marcus called me personally. He said, "Clara, you know how the rider works. You've got 3 years. When you're ready, call me. The date is yours." I thanked him. I filed the contract and the rider in a manila folder in the second drawer of my kitchen hutch. I told no one in my family about the rider. Not because I was scheming, because telling my family about $48,000 of my own money would have summoned a specific kind of conversation I did not have the strength to have. My mother had been told through the family grapevine that Elliot and I had lost the deposit when we canceled. She had clucked about it at Easter. "That's what you get for rushing." I let her think it. That was my first mistake. 6 weeks after I called off the wedding, my mother called me. It was a Thursday. I remember because I was in a vendor meeting and had to step out into the hallway. "Clara, sweetie," she said, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be mature about it." "Okay." "Delaney is dating someone. It's serious. I think they might get engaged soon." "That's fast." "Don't be like that. Anyway, if they do, she's going to want a real wedding, a proper one, not like the Napa thing. She says she wants something traditional this time, local, beautiful." "Okay." And I was just thinking, since you aren't using your date, and since Ashford Hall is so hard to get into, wouldn't it be lovely if Delaney could? "Mom, just listen. I know it's sensitive, but you said yourself the deposit was lost. So the venue is just sitting there. It would be such a gift, Clara. It would mean so much to her. And honestly, it would help you move forward. You can't heal while you're holding on to a wedding that isn't happening." I stood in that hallway for 10 seconds without speaking. I counted. 10 seconds. Then I said, "Mom, the venue isn't just sitting there. Ashford Hall doesn't work that way. Delaney would have to book it herself on her own contract the way everyone does." "Well, can't you talk to someone?" "No." "Clara." "Mom, I have to get back to my meeting." I hung up. I went back into the conference room. I made it through the next 40 minutes of discussion about a nonprofit gala seating chart without saying a word about my sister. That night, I took the manila folder out of the drawer. I read the rider again. I read the sole-signatory clause. I read the non-transferable provision. I read the section about unauthorized third-party bookings being grounds for forfeit of the deposit. Then I put the folder back in the drawer. I told myself my mother would let it go. That was my second mistake. 11 days ago, the group text arrived. I was on my couch with a glass of wine. My phone buzzed. I opened it. I read my mother's announcement 3 times before my eyes actually registered the date. April 18th, Ashford Hall. Delaney and Preston's wedding. Save the date. April 18th was the date I had originally booked for myself. Preston was Delaney's new fiancé, a man I had met exactly twice. My mother's text called him a sweetheart from Charleston. The heart emoji pulsed at me from the screen. I did not reply in the group. I opened a direct message to my mother. "Mom, what is this?" She replied in 40 seconds. "Don't be dramatic, Clara. Your father and I talked to Delaney. We decided it's the right thing. You weren't going to use the date anyway, and we made it work. You're going to feel so much better once you see her happy." I sat with the phone in my hand. Something in my chest went still. "Made it work how, Mom?" "We're handling it. Don't worry about the money." "What money, Mom?" "The deposit situation. Your father and I took care of it. We refinanced a little. Nothing you need to think about." I read that message 4 times. I set the phone face down on my coffee table. I walked to the kitchen. I took the manila folder out of the drawer. I sat at my kitchen table with the folder open in front of me, and I did what I do for a living. I started a timeline. I called Aunt Regina the next morning. Aunt Regina is my mother's older sister. They have not spoken in 9 years. The estrangement happened over my grandmother's estate, and the short version is that my mother felt entitled to things she was not legally entitled to, and Aunt Regina had the spine to say so. I'd kept in touch with Aunt Regina on my own since I was 19. She was the one who had taught me to read a contract, actually. She had worked for 30 years as a paralegal at a family law firm before she retired. "Regina," I said when she picked up, "I need to run something by you." "Talk to me, honey." I told her about the text. I told her about the venue. I told her about the deposit rider. I told her about the sole-signatory clause. I told her my mother had said something about refinancing. Regina was quiet for 8 seconds. I counted. Then she said, "Clara, sweethearts, you know what your mother did, don't you?" "Tell me." "She told Delaney the venue was available and paid for. She told Delaney you had signed off on it. She probably told her you wanted to gift it to her as a makeup for the first wedding. She's built a story, and your father is letting her." The refinancing. That's the part I want you to look at. How much was your deposit? $48,000. How much do you think a second wedding at a place like Ashford Hall actually costs to host? Catering, flowers, dress, photographer, band, bar, the whole thing. For 150 people at Ashford Hall, minimum 180, probably closer to 220. Right. Clara, your parents didn't refinance to pay you back your deposit. They refinanced to fund Delaney's wedding, her vendors, her gown, her everything. And they did it on the assumption that the venue itself was already taken care of. Because you lost the deposit, remember? In their heads, the venue was already sunk cost. Aunt Regina, what, honey? The venue isn't sunk cost. It's mine. I know. I sat on the phone. My hand was steady on the counter. I noticed that. My hand was steady. Regina, what did they refinance? Baby, I don't know for sure. But if I had to guess based on your mother, HELOC against the house. It's the quickest way to get 6 figures without a whole mortgage application. She'd do that without telling me? Clara, she already did. I hung up. I stood in my kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. I noticed the hum. I noticed the way the light from the window fell across the manila folder. I noticed that I was not crying. I noticed I was thinking. Here is what I did next. I called Marcus Holbrook at Ashford Hall. I did not tell him what was happening. I said, Marcus, hi, quick administrative question. Can you confirm for me that my master contract and rider from the cancellation are still in force and that my name is the only name attached? He said, let me pull it. Hold on. I heard him typing. 20 seconds. Yes, Clara. Sole signatory. Rider valid through February of next year. You're the only person authorized to book a date under this contract. Has anyone inquired about booking Ashford Hall on April 18th for a wedding? A pause. Clara, where is this going? Just tell me, Marcus. Yes. A woman called 12 weeks ago. Said she was your sister. Said you had agreed she could use your hold. I told her that wasn't how we operate and that any booking would need to be initiated by you, in writing, with a signed transfer request from legal. She said she'd have you call me. I never called. I know. I assumed the conversation had been handled. Then last week, a different woman, older, called the catering manager, not me, and said the date was confirmed and she needed to start coordinating her vendor's access. The catering manager passed it to events because we had no record. Events passed it back to me this morning, actually. I was going to call you today. I put my hand on the kitchen counter to steady it. Marcus. There is no booking. There is no transfer. My mother and sister have been telling 150 guests that the wedding is happening on April 18th at Ashford Hall. Invitations went out. Save the dates went out. Deposits have been collected from vendors who think the venue is booked. Silence on the line. Then, Clara, are you telling me your family is committing venue fraud? I'm telling you, my family is operating under the sincere belief that I will fold and sign when the time comes. And are you going to? No. Another silence. Clara, as the general manager, I am obligated to inform you that Ashford Hall cannot and will not host a wedding on April 18th without a signed and legally executed booking from you personally. If vendors arrive on the property claiming a booking that does not exist, we will turn them away. I am going to need you to decide what you want to do here. Marcus, I need 48 hours to think. Please keep this conversation between us. Don't communicate anything to anyone who calls claiming to represent the booking. 48 hours. You got it. Clara. Yes. Are you okay? Marcus, I'm completely fine. I hung up. I sat at my kitchen table. I opened a new spreadsheet. I started making a list. I want to pause here for a second. If you have ever been the quiet daughter in a family that assumed quiet meant weak, I see you. If you have ever been told your profession was cute, while the people telling you that were secretly relying on your professional skills to keep their lives functional, drop a comment and tell me where you were when you realized it. And if this story is hitting close to home, hit that subscribe button, because the 48 hours I spent building what I built next are the reason my family's version of events ended the way it did. And I want you here for it. I am going to tell you what I did in those 48 hours because it matters. First, I went to a family law attorney Aunt Regina referred me to. Her name is Evelyn Park. She has 30 years of estate and contracts experience. She charges $450 an hour, and she is worth every cent. Her office was on the 11th floor of a building downtown I pass 3 times a week without noticing. The waiting room smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper. There was a bowl of green apples on the reception desk. I took one. I did not eat it. I held it on my lap while I waited. Evelyn is 62, small, and has the posture of a woman who has watched a lot of people try to intimidate her and fail. She wore a gray blazer and reading glasses on a thin chain. When I walked in, she shook my hand, sat me down, and said, "Regina called me yesterday. She gave me the short version. I want the long version. Start at the top. Don't skip anything you think isn't relevant, because I will be the judge of that." I started at the top. I brought her the master contract. I brought her the rider. I brought her screenshots of the family group text. I brought her my notes from the call with Marcus. I brought her Aunt Regina's theory about the HELOC. I brought her a printed copy of every text my mother had sent me in the last 6 weeks, because I had learned at 24 to screenshot my mother's texts on the day they arrived and to keep them in a folder on my laptop labeled Diane, dated. Evelyn, when she saw the folder, did not comment on it, but she tilted her head half an inch. I took that as approval. Evelyn read for 18 minutes without speaking. I watched the clock on her wall. At minute 19, she took off her reading glasses and set them on top of the contract. Then she looked at me over her glasses and said, "Clara, you are sitting on a very clean legal position. Do you understand how clean? Tell me." The contract is in your name only. The rider explicitly prohibits transfer. Your mother does not have signature authority on this document. Your sister does not have signature authority on this document. Anyone who has collected vendor deposits or issued invitations referencing this venue on April 18th has done so on the basis of a booking that does not exist. If your parents refinanced a home to fund a wedding whose venue they do not have legal access to, that is their problem, not yours. The venue remains yours. The rider remains yours. The decision to use it or not use it is entirely yours. What if I do nothing? Then at some point between now and April 18th, Ashford Hall turns away the vendors. The wedding collapses at the venue level. Your family is publicly embarrassed. But that's an expensive way to handle it, Clara, because vendors have non-refundable deposits. Your family is going to eat those costs, and there will be guests flying in. And your mother is going to find a way to make the collapse your fault. What are my other options? Evelyn smiled a very small smile. Well, she said, you could show up. She let that sentence sit for a moment. Then she walked me through it. If you show up, she said, you turn a private family disaster into a public act of clarity. You speak calmly in front of witnesses. You produce the document. You name the amount. You identify who made what decision. You do this before the ceremony if you want to prevent the marriage, which I would advise against, because that punishes Preston for something he didn't do. Or after the ceremony, when the room gathers for the reception, and you speak before the toasts. That way, the marriage stands. Preston is not embarrassed in front of the vows, but the family fraud does not stand. Your mother cannot go home on Monday morning pretending this didn't happen because 150 witnesses watched it happen. And legally, what happens to me? Nothing happens to you. You are asserting a contract right you have always had. You are not making threats. You are not making false statements. You are stating facts and producing the paper that proves them. If anyone in your family tries to sue you, which they won't because they can't afford to and they have no grounds, every court in this state will throw it out on a motion to dismiss. You are the signatory, period. And the HELOC. The HELOC is your parents' debt, not yours. You never signed anything. You were never consulted. The money is gone. They spent it on vendors. Those vendors will either deliver partial service and keep partial payments or keep the deposits and walk away. Your parents will owe that money to the bank for the next 25 years at whatever variable rate they locked in, which, if your mother filed in February, is probably around 9%. That is a consequence they chose. It is not your job to carry it. I sat with that for 10 seconds. I counted. Evelyn, can I think about it? Clara, take the weekend. Call me Monday. Whatever you decide, I will help you execute. I stood up. I handed her the green apple. She looked at it. She laughed. Actually laughed. Keep it, she said, for later. I took it home. I put it in a bowl on my counter. I ate it 3 days later, the morning of my second meeting with her, when I walked in and said, I want to show up. Let me tell you about the weekend. I did not leave my apartment. I ordered takeout twice. I watched one movie and did not remember it. I washed my sheets. I cleaned out my fridge. I did the kind of slow, methodical housekeeping that people do when they are about to make a decision they cannot undo. Aunt Regina called on Saturday afternoon. I picked up. Clara, are you sitting down? I'm doing laundry. That counts. Sit down. I sat on the edge of my bed. Your grandmother, Regina said, left a small amount of money when she died. Not a lot. $36,000. The will specified it was to be split between you and your sister. When your mother handled the estate, she told me the money had been absorbed into final expenses. I believed her at the time. I was wrong. I found a bank statement last month while I was cleaning out my own files. The money was never absorbed. Your mother moved it into a joint account with Delaney 9 years ago. Delaney has been drawing on it ever since. I did not react immediately. I counted to 5. Regina, are you sure? I have the statements. I have the original will. I have a note your grandmother wrote by hand specifying the split. Your mother hid all of it. I found it because I was going through boxes Grandma had left me, not boxes I thought she had given to your mother. Why are you telling me this now? Because you are about to make a decision about how much of your family to keep in your life. And I think you should make that decision with all the information, not part of it. I am not asking you to do anything with this. I am telling you so you know what you know. I sat on my bed. The sun was going down through the blinds in my bedroom. I could hear my upstairs neighbor running a shower. I noticed all of it. I said, "Thank you, Aunt Regina. I'm not going to do anything with the grandmother thing. Not yet. One reversal at a time." That's the right answer, honey. Regina, will you come on the 18th? I was going to come whether you asked or not, baby. I'll be there at 3. I hung up. I stood in my bedroom. I opened the blinds. I watched a jogger go by on the sidewalk below. I said out loud to no one in the room, "Okay." And then I called Evelyn Park. Day 3 after the group text, my mother started the pressure campaign. I had stopped replying in the group. I had stopped replying to her direct messages. She escalated. "Clara, please call me. Clara, your sister is in tears. She thinks you're mad at her. Clara, I raised you better than this. Clara, your father and I need to talk to you about the final vendor payments. We need you to confirm the venue is all set so the caterer can finalize their insurance." That one I read 4 times. The caterer's insurance. Every licensed caterer carries a certificate of insurance naming the venue as an additional insured for the event date. The COI pulls directly from the venue's booking record. If there is no booking, there is no COI. If there is no COI, the caterer legally cannot serve food on the property. My mother didn't know any of that. She was asking me to confirm something she didn't understand because a caterer had, correctly, asked her for paperwork she could not produce. The caterer knew the wedding was in trouble. The caterer was stalling. I did not reply to my mother. Day 4. My father called. My father almost never calls. I let it go to voicemail. His voicemail was short. "Clara, it's your dad. Your mother is a lot, I know. Can we talk without her? Just you and me?" I called him back 2 hours later. "Dad." "Clara, thank you for calling." "Dad, what did Mom do with the HELOC?" Silence. Then, "How did you—" "Aunt Regina." "That woman." "Dad, how much?" Another silence. Then, very quietly, 180. $180,000. The vendors needed to be paid. Your mother said you were on board. She said you and Delaney had talked about it. I should have asked you directly, Clara. I know that. Dad, I have never spoken to Delaney about this. Not once. Not a text. Not a word. A long, long silence. Clara, your mother told me you'd agreed. She lied to you, Dad. Oh, my God. Dad, I need you to answer me honestly. Do you think I'm going to sign the venue over? Clara, sweetheart, you have to. The money's gone. We already spent most of it on the vendors. The dress is paid for. The flowers are paid for. The band, the photographer. If there's no venue, Clara. Dad, I'm not signing it over. Clara. I'm not yelling, Dad. I'm not angry. I'm telling you, clearly and calmly that I am not signing over a contract that is in my name for a wedding I am not hosting to subsidize a decision Mom made without me. That's a sentence. That's the whole sentence. Clara, please. Dad, I love you. I'm going to hang up now. I hung up. My hand was steady. My voice had not cracked. I sat on my couch and I looked at the ceiling for a long time. Delaney called 30 minutes later. I knew it was coming. I let the first call go to voicemail. She called again immediately. I let that one go too. On the third call, I picked up because I wanted to hear what version of the story she had been given. Clara, she said, oh my God, I am so glad you picked up. Mom told me you and Dad just talked. She said he was really upset. Are you okay? Hi, Delaney. Listen, I know things have been weird. I just want to say, sister to sister, I didn't know any of this was a problem. I thought you had agreed. I swear to God, I thought it was settled. Mom told me the whole thing was your idea. She said you offered. Delaney, stop. What? Stop. I am going to ask you one question, and I want you to answer it. Did you, at any point in the last 5 months, send me a single text asking if I was okay with you having my venue? A voicemail, an email, a Facebook message, anything? Silence. 6 seconds. I counted. Clara, I just assumed that's not an answer. Did you reach out to me directly once? I figured Mom had. Delaney, did you reach out to me directly one time? No, okay, no, but then you didn't think it was settled. You chose not to ask because you were afraid of the answer. And Mom told you what you wanted to hear, and you let her. That's a decision, Delaney. You made it. You don't get to unmake it by telling me you assumed. Her voice shifted. The soft version dropped off. The other version came up. I knew this version. This was the version of Delaney that my mother called spirited. Clara, don't be like this. You've had your little breakdown, okay? You called off your wedding. You cried about Elliot, fine. But the rest of us are trying to move forward. I'm trying to get married to a good man, to someone who actually wants to be with me. And you are sitting there alone in your apartment trying to punish me for being happy. That's what this is. You're jealous. You're jealous because I'm getting a second chance and you're not. I did not respond for 8 seconds. I counted. Then I said, Delaney, I want you to listen carefully because I am only going to say this once. I am not jealous of you. I have never been jealous of you. I have spent 29 years being told to be smaller so that you could be bigger. And I did it. And I did it well. And one of the consequences of doing it well is that the entire family now believes I am a person who does not have a breaking point. I do. This is it. You went too far. Mom went too far. Dad let her. And I'm about to become the person you have always assumed I was not. Clara, what does that mean? It means I'll see you on the 18th. Clara, wait! I hung up. I blocked her number for 48 hours, not because I was trying to hurt her, but because I did not trust myself to listen to another call from her without saying something I would regret. 48 hours later, I unblocked her because I wanted to be able to look at the transcript later and know that every one of her escalations after that call had reached me, and I had chosen not to respond. She sent 17 texts in those 48 hours. I read them all after. They escalated exactly the way Evelyn had predicted. Apology, anger, apology, manipulation, apology, threat, apology, promise, apology. I did not reply to any of them. Then I called Evelyn Park back one last time, 2 days before the wedding. I said, I want to walk through exactly where I stand, exactly where she'll stand, exactly where Marcus will stand. I want to know what I say in the first 30 seconds, and I want to know what I say if she tries to touch me. Evelyn said, come in at 10 tomorrow morning. Bring the portfolio. We'll rehearse. I went. We rehearsed. I stood in her conference room and read the first 30 seconds of my statement out loud 6 times until she stopped stopping me. The 7th time, she nodded and said, that's the one. Say it exactly like that on Saturday. I drove home. I did not practice it again. I did not want it to sound practiced. I want to show up, I said. I thought you might, she said. Let's build you a plan. Right now we are 11 days out from the wedding. The family thinks I am going to fold. My mother has sent me 11 more texts in the last 72 hours, none of which I have answered. My father has called 3 times. My sister has posted 2 public Instagram stories about sibling healing and choosing grace. The vendors are stalling. The caterer has stopped returning calls. Ashford Hall is quietly turning away every inquiry that references April 18th. Marcus has kept his word. If you've ever been the one everyone assumed would quietly clean up a mess you didn't make, hit that like button. Tell me in the comments, would you show up? Or would you let the whole thing collapse without you? I want to know. And if you want to see what actually happened when I walked through the front door of Ashford Hall on April 18th, stay with me. This is the part I have been waiting to tell you. I arrive at Ashford Hall at 3:42 p.m. on a Saturday. The wedding is scheduled for 5 p.m. I am wearing a navy silk dress I bought for a corporate gala last year, flat shoes, a small leather portfolio tucked under my arm. My hair is pulled back. I am wearing one piece of jewelry, a thin gold bracelet my grandmother gave me when I turned 21. I park in the staff lot. I walk through the carriage house entrance, not the main drive. Marcus is waiting for me inside the events office. So is Evelyn Park. So is a sheriff's deputy Evelyn has prearranged, not for enforcement, but for presence. Evelyn has explained to me that when you're about to make a public legal statement in front of 150 people, you want a uniform in the room. You want calm to look like calm, not like threat. There is also a second person I did not expect. Aunt Regina. She has driven in from 3 hours away. She is wearing a slate gray dress and pearls. She says, I'm here to tell the truth if they ask for it. I nod. I do not hug her because I am not ready to cry. Marcus says, the guests are arriving. Your mother is already at the bridal suite with your sister. Your father is on the lawn greeting people. Preston's family is in the garden. No one has seen you yet. What's the plan? Evelyn says, Clara walks into the reception hall, not the garden, not the suite, the reception hall, where the seating is already arranged, where the head table is already set. That's where the announcement happens, because that's where everyone will eventually congregate. When do I go in? I say. 10 minutes before the ceremony, Evelyn says, when every guest is seated and your mother is walking down the aisle toward your father. You walk in, you stand at the head table, and when they come in after the ceremony, you will already be there, waiting. I nod. I count. 30 seconds. Then I walk. I want to describe the reception hall because it matters. The hall at Ashford Hall seats 200. It is a restored ballroom with 12-foot windows, original walnut floors, and a vaulted ceiling painted robin's egg blue. Tonight, it has been decorated in cream and dusty rose. The head table is draped in ivory silk. There are calligraphed place cards. The card at the center of the head table reads, Mrs. Preston Ashworth. Not Delaney, Mrs. Preston Ashworth. My sister has already taken her husband's name on the place card 2 hours before the vows. I notice the small things. My hands are not shaking. I set my portfolio on the head table, centered, next to the place card that does not have my sister's real name on it. I pull out the chair my mother would have sat in. I sit in it. Evelyn sits on my left. Marcus stands near the service entrance with his hands folded. Aunt Regina stands near the main doors. The deputy stands in the hallway, out of sight. At 4:47 p.m., the ceremony ends. I can hear it through the wall. Applause, then music, then the slow hum of 150 people being herded from the garden toward the reception. The double doors swing open. My mother walks in first. She is wearing a dove gray gown. She is laughing at something one of the aunts has said. She is mid-word when she sees me. She stops. The aunts behind her stop. The people behind the aunts stop. Within 40 seconds, there are maybe 60 people in the hall. The rest are still in the hallway. The music is still playing over the speakers. My mother's face does a thing I have never seen it do before. It drops the laugh. It picks up a performance. She walks toward me with her arms open, wide, theatrical. Clara, oh my goodness, sweetheart, you made it. I didn't know if you were going to come. Everyone, Clara's here. I do not stand up. She reaches the head table. She leans down to hug me. I lean back, just enough that she cannot reach my shoulders without climbing onto the table. Her arms hover. The laugh falters. She recovers. Clara, sweetie, you're in Delaney's seat. Let's get you moved, okay? We saved you a lovely spot at table 9. It's right near the dance floor. Mom. Clara, come on. Don't make a scene. Mom, I'm not making a scene. I'm sitting down. At this point, Delaney has entered. She is in a champagne gown. Preston is behind her in a cream tuxedo. They both freeze when they see me. Delaney's face does something similar to our mother's, a quick recalibration from bride light to I can fix this. Clara, Delaney says, arms out. Oh my God, you came. Mom said you might not. Delaney, sit down. I'm sorry? Sit down. Your guests are coming in. You should greet them. My mother's voice has dropped an octave. Clara, stand up. Now. I count 3 seconds. I say no. The room, by now, has about 100 people in it. The rest are packed into the hallway trying to get in. Preston's parents, the Charleston sweethearts, are standing 10 feet from the head table, with the stunned politeness of people who are watching a situation unfold and have not yet decided if it is theirs. Delaney tries again, louder, for the room. Clara, honey, I know this is hard for you. I know what Elliot did was devastating. Mom told me how much you've been struggling. We all just want you to be a part of today. Please don't ruin this because you're hurting. That is when she made the mistake. That is when she asked the trigger question. She said in a voice pitched to reach the whole room, Clara, do you want me to have Marcus escort you out? Or are you going to be a grown-up about this? She pointed at Marcus. Marcus, standing at the service entrance in his tailored black suit, did not move. I did. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I picked up my portfolio. I opened it. I took out the master contract. 42 pages. I set it on the table in front of me so the cover page was visible to every person who could see the head table. The heading at the top of that cover page is the Ashford Hall logo and the words Master Venue Agreement, Sole Signatory. Below the logo is my full name, Clara Marie Whitfield. I took out the rider. I set it next to the contract. The rider is a single page. At the top it says, Deposit Conversion and Personal Use License, non-transferable. I spoke at a conversational volume. I did not need to speak louder. The room was already silent. My name is Clara Marie Whitfield. I am a Senior Director of Events at Langston Burke Venue Management. I have worked in this industry for 7 years. 14 months ago, I signed a master venue agreement with Ashford Hall for a wedding that did not take place. When I canceled that wedding, my $48,000 deposit did not disappear. It converted under the terms of an addendum signed by me and by Ashford Hall's general manager, Marcus Holbrook, on the same day, into a 3-year personal use license. That license is sole signatory. It is non-transferable. It is held entirely in my name. I paused. I picked up the rider. I held it at shoulder height so the people in the back could see I was holding a document. My mother, Diane Whitfield, and my sister, Delaney Whitfield, do not have booking authority at Ashford Hall. They have never had booking authority at Ashford Hall. Ashford Hall has never received a signed transfer request from me because I have never signed one, because no one ever asked me to. The event you are all here to attend tonight is, as of this moment, not a booked event. It is not insured. The caterer waiting in the kitchen does not have a certificate of insurance covering this date because no booking exists to generate one. The ceremony that just happened in the garden occurred on a property whose legal access for this event was never secured. You were all invited to a wedding whose venue was never, at any point, legally reserved. My mother made a sound. I heard it. I did not look at her. I want to be extremely clear about one more thing. My parents, Richard and Diane Whitfield, recently refinanced their home. They took out a home equity line of credit in the amount of $180,000 to pay vendors for tonight's wedding. They did so on the explicit assumption that the venue itself was already paid for and that I would at some point hand it over. I was never asked. I never agreed. I was never consulted. I learned about the HELOC from a family member 4 days ago. I set the rider down. I looked at Preston's parents. I looked directly at them. Mr. and Mrs. Ashworth. I am sorry you have been brought into this. I want you to understand that this is not a quarrel between sisters. This is a documented case of my family collecting deposits, issuing invitations, and representing a wedding venue they did not own and did not have permission to represent. Your son has married into a family whose matriarch has, at minimum, committed consumer fraud against every vendor who issued a deposit under the assumption that a booking existed. I am telling you this because you deserve to know who your son's in-laws are. I am not telling you to undo your son's marriage. Mrs. Ashworth, a woman in her late 60s in a periwinkle gown, said very quietly, "Oh my God." I turned to Marcus. Marcus, I am asking you, as general manager of Ashford Hall, to confirm for this room what I have just said. Marcus stepped forward. He held up a single sheet of paper, his own printout from the Ashford Hall booking system. He said in a voice loud enough to carry, "Ashford Hall has no active booking for April 18th under the names Whitfield or Ashworth. The only active contract referencing this date is Clara Whitfield's personal use license, which is unused. I have personally turned away 3 vendor inquiries over the last 2 weeks from parties attempting to confirm a booking that does not exist in our system. Everything Miss Whitfield has said is accurate." I turned to Aunt Regina. "Aunt Regina, I am asking you to confirm what I told you on the phone 11 days ago." Aunt Regina stepped forward. She said, "Clara called me 11 days ago in shock. She read me a family group text announcing a wedding at a venue she still legally controls. She had no prior knowledge. She had not agreed. She had not been consulted. I was the one who told her her parents had likely taken a HELOC. Her father confirmed it to her by phone 4 days ago. I was there for that call on speaker at Clara's request. Everything she has said is accurate. I am her witness." I turned finally to my mother. "Mom, I have one question. Did you tell Dad I had agreed to give the venue to Delaney?" My mother did not answer. "Mom, did you tell Dad I had agreed?" She said, "Clara, this isn't the place. Mom, Dad is standing right there. He is going to hear the answer. Did you tell him I had agreed?" My father, who had been standing by the side entrance with his hands in his pockets, stepped forward. He said, without looking at my mother, "Yes, she told me Clara had agreed. I believed her. I shouldn't have." The room by that point had maybe 125 people in it and was silent except for the faint music still coming from the outdoor speakers. My mother's collapse did not happen in one moment. It happened in small, visible increments over the next 90 seconds. First, her face went white. I watched it happen. The color drained from her jaw upward. She reached for the back of a chair and missed and caught the edge of a table instead. Then she said, "Clara, how could you do this to your sister?" Which was the wrong sentence, because it implied that I was the one who had done something, and the room had just finished watching me do the opposite of something. Then my sister Delaney said, at full voice, "Mom, Mom, Mom, what did you do?" Then my mother turned on Delaney. "Don't you dare. Don't you dare turn on me. I did this for you. I did all of this for you." Then Preston, my brand new brother-in-law, said, very quietly and very clearly, "Mom, Dad, I think we need to go home." His parents were already moving toward the door. They were not looking at Delaney. They were not looking at my mother. They were moving at the speed of people who have decided that the distance between themselves and a family scandal is no longer negotiable. Delaney sat down in the middle of the aisle, on the floor, in her champagne gown. She put her face in her hands. My mother kept talking. She talked for another 40 seconds. I didn't listen to the words. I watched my father instead. He did not move toward her. He did not move toward Delaney. He walked slowly across the length of the hall, past every guest, and stopped at the head table in front of me. He said, "Clara, I know I was wrong. I've always been a coward." I did not answer him. I wasn't ready. I don't know if I will ever be ready. I nodded once, which was all I had. Marcus stepped forward again. He said to the room, "Ashford Hall is going to begin asking guests to leave the property. Refreshments are available in the carriage house lobby for anyone who needs a moment before driving. Thank you for your understanding." And then, quietly to me, he said, "Clara, you did that beautifully." I didn't answer him either. I picked up the portfolio. I walked out the service entrance. Aunt Regina walked with me. Evelyn walked behind us. I made it to the parking lot before my hands started shaking. Here is what happened in the 72 hours after April 18th. Day 1. The caterer filed a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. Their argument? My mother had represented a booking that did not exist and collected a $22,000 non-refundable deposit under false pretenses. The caterer was keeping the deposit. They were also naming my mother in a small claims filing for breach of their vendor agreement, which had required proof of venue insurance that could never be produced. Day 2. The florist, the photographer, and the band all followed. 4 vendor complaints filed in 48 hours. Total deposits forfeited, $61,000. My parents' $180,000 HELOC was now, in effect, $81,000 of real debt against their home for services that had either not been rendered or could not legally have been rendered. Day 3. The bank that issued the HELOC opened an internal review. A family law attorney for Preston's family had contacted them, not to make a complaint, but to formally document that the funds from the HELOC had been used to pay for a wedding whose venue was never legally booked. The bank did not freeze the HELOC because that's not how banks work, but they did flag the file. My parents' credit score, which I learned later from Aunt Regina, dropped 92 points inside of 3 weeks. Day 4. Delaney's Instagram sponsors, the hair oil brand, 2 clothing companies, and a wellness tea she'd been posting about for 6 months, all went quiet. Within 2 weeks, 3 of them had either paused her contracts or let them lapse. Delaney posted a long story about a season of rest. She had 300,000 followers the day of the wedding. By midsummer, she had under 200,000. Day 5. Ashford Hall's corporate office, after consulting with Marcus, formally banned Diane and Richard Whitfield and Delaney Whitfield from booking any event at any Ashford Hall property in perpetuity. Marcus sent me the letter as a courtesy. I filed it in the manila folder. Day 6. My firm's managing partner called me into his office. For a minute, I thought I was in trouble. He closed the door. He said, "Clara, I heard about what happened last weekend. I heard 3 versions of it from 3 different clients who had guests there. I want you to know 2 things. 1, everything I heard reflects extremely well on you professionally. 2, the board has been discussing your advancement to partner track for 6 months. We were going to tell you next quarter. I am telling you now. Congratulations." I walked out of his office. I sat at my desk. I did not cry at my desk. I made it to the parking garage first. Then I cried. Once. For about 8 minutes. And then I stopped. The calls and texts came in waves. Aunts who had clapped at my mother's announcement texted me privately. "Clara, I had no idea. I'm so sorry." I replied to each of them the same way. "Thank you. I appreciate you reaching out. I'm taking some time." I did not reinstate any of them into my regular life. I also did not burn the bridges. I let them sit. My mother sent me a long email on day 9. The email had 3 parts. Part 1 was an apology. I could tell she had workshopped with at least one other person because the sentence structure was not hers. Part 2 was a list of things she still felt she was owed from me. Part 3 was a request that I help her talk to the bank. I did not reply. My father called on day 12. He did not ask for anything. He said, "Clara, I am going to counseling. I want you to know I'm doing it for me, not for your mother. I'm not asking you to be in my life. I am telling you I'm working on being a person you might, someday, want to be in the life of." I said, "Dad, I'll think about it." It was the most honest sentence I had given him in 10 years. Delaney sent me a Venmo request 3 weeks after the wedding for $1,200. The note said, "Share of the rehearsal dinner you didn't attend." I declined the request. I did not send a message. I did not block her. I just declined it. Some acts of distance don't need explanation. 6 months later, I sat at a different table in a different room, signing a different kind of paper. I was buying a house. A small brick bungalow 22 minutes from my office, with a lemon tree in the backyard that the previous owners had warned me sometimes drops fruit on the deck in November. I was paying the down payment in full from my own savings, the savings I had built back in the 14 months since my canceled wedding, plus the small inheritance Aunt Regina had quietly gifted me on my 29th birthday. Because your grandmother wanted one of you to get it, and I couldn't make it happen while my sister was alive to fight about it. I signed the mortgage paperwork on a Tuesday at 4:45 p.m. Same time of day I had once dropped off Elliot's suitcases. I noticed that. I didn't cry about it. I just noticed. Aunt Regina and Evelyn were my 2 witnesses on the closing. Marcus Holbrook sent me a card. It said, "Clara, I have hosted 300 weddings at Ashford Hall. I have never seen anyone handle a room the way you handled that one. M." I taped the card inside the manila folder. The manila folder is still in the second drawer of my kitchen hutch, in the new kitchen, in the new house. I open the drawer sometimes and I look at it, and I close it again. I had dinner with my father once, in August. He came to the city. He took me to a small Italian place near my office. He did not talk about my mother. He asked me about work. He asked me about the house. At the end of the dinner, before he got in his car, he handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photograph. Me at 11, holding the essay contest certificate I had won, the one that had been taken off the fridge. He said, "I kept it. I don't know why I never gave it to you. I'm giving it to you now." I took the envelope home. I did not frame the photograph. I did not throw it away. I put it in a drawer. Some gifts take time to know what to do with. My mother has not reached out in 5 months. I am not waiting for her to. Delaney and Preston are, as best I can tell, still married. They live, according to Aunt Regina, in a small apartment. Preston is paying down his own share of the wedding debt. Delaney is, I am told, waitressing. I do not wish her ill. I do not wish her well. I wish her the specific thing I have wished for her my entire adult life, which is that one day she will look at a situation and ask honestly, what would I do here if I were not the center of it? I don't expect her to arrive at the answer, but I've stopped carrying it for her. The folder is not a trophy. The folder is a reminder that the version of me who signed that contract 14 months ago did not know what she was saving. She thought she was saving a wedding date. She was actually saving a piece of herself. Here is what I want to leave you with. My family assumed I was broken. They were partially right. I had been broken. When Elliot walked out of my life, I lost a version of my future I had planned carefully for 3 years. I was, for a while, very quiet. I did not talk about it. I did not post about it. I kept working. I kept showing up. I answered my phone when my mother called to ask for things, and I said I'm fine when she asked how I was, because telling her the truth would have given her something to use. My family mistook that quiet for absence. They mistook professional calm for weakness. They mistook my willingness to keep showing up at holidays for a willingness to hand them whatever they asked for. They forgot that I read contracts for a living. I want you to hear me. If you are the quiet daughter, if you are the one who handles things, if you are the one whose profession is treated like a punchline, while your family quietly relies on the skills that profession has given you, I want you to know something. Boundaries are not revenge. Boundaries are architecture. You draw the lines where the load-bearing walls go. You decide what the structure can hold. You decide who has keys. The people who underestimated you are not the ones who get to decide how the building stands. If you made it this far, thank you. Really. An hour of your time is not a small thing, and I don't take it lightly. If this story reminded you of someone in your own life, maybe someone who assumed your silence was agreement, tell me in the comments. And I have one question for you. The one I've been sitting with ever since April 18th. If you were me, would you have shown up? Or would you have let it collapse on its own? Drop your answer below. Tell me what you would have done. And if you want more stories about quiet women and the documents their families should have read, there's a playlist linked in the description. I'll see you in the next one. Clara.